I agree.
We need to forget it.
I agree.
I remember feeling that way of, growing up, as refer to myself as a post-civil rights son with a father who was involved, with an uncle who was involved on a national level, a father who was involved on, national and local level. But I always felt like, damn, I missed it. I was, you felt like the battle had already been fought and the bodies were already on the ground, and we kind of just had to walk through and just long for. I just wish that I wish I could have been involved in that time frame. But very seldom do you recognize history when you're in it.
Yeah.
And we are in it. This is the time.
This is history. This is the biggest historic moment of our lives.
Right.
Yeah. You are so right.
We can't blow it. Well, no. This has been. I mean, we're gonna continue this. This conversation is gonna continue. We're gonna go each week. We're gonna be doing something else or some piece of that where we have to kind of continue this and keep the ball rolling, because as you say, what was it, a couple weeks ago, Chief, that we had Dr. Powers.
Yes, sir.
Who used to work with the FBI, and he said when he was with the FBI years ago, they did a profile on Black folks, and it was funny to hear us, hear about us being treated, treating us in a like an experiment, and he laid out the fact that we, Black folks will, they'll be upset, they'll be passionate, they will. Act out, they will riot. But if you can contain them and withstand it for 3 or 4 days, it'll burn out. If you can handle it 3 or 4 days, it'll burn out and it'll stop and things will go back to normal. And, there was some report in the FBI to that end. Am I right, Chief? It was something that kind of had us pegged, where people had us, oh, don't worry about it, just 72 hours or so and things will go back to normal. They may act up crazy, just kind of contain them, keep them in their place, where they are, let them burn up their stuff, where they live, and just don't let them get elsewhere, and things will go back to normal. And heretofore, I hate to admit it, but it seems like in a lot of times where we've had the ball, the ball was in our court, and we had the chance to move politically and otherwise. We just did not. But something about this particular time right now feels different.
It is.
Yes.
It is very different. You have that kind of the momentum that needs to continue. Kevin, one of the questions that Brian asked on his way out when he left out, he said, what books, because he's, as I mentioned, he's a teacher as well, and he has a lot of professors of different colors. He said, what books are you recommending to white folk for them to read?
Well, the first book that comes to mind is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important book for white sisters and brothers, white folks to read. And I do really believe we're all sisters and brothers. That's why I say that. I think that Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States is for white folks, Black folks, every folks in this country. The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. I strongly recommend. A lot of people sleep on Dr. Bell Hooks. I think she's one of the most important scholars that we've had in the last 40 years. She has literally written about 40 books in the last 40 years across race, gender, class, pop culture, politics, spirituality, love, self-esteem. And I encourage you to look up Bell Hooks, anything by her.
Transgress. Yeah, all some of the.
Yeah, and I want to encourage people to check out. My publicist would be on me if I don't say it. When We Free the World is my 14th book, When We Free the World, which is about race, gender, class, all of it, about our times. And it's, exclusively with Apple Books right now. So you have to have an iPhone, a iPad, or a Mac to get it. But it'll be a paperback in the fall by September. But definitely check out When We Free the World, because I had no idea when I was working on this book a year ago and just kind of fine tuning it that it's a lot of stuff that we're talking about, would explode like this. But here we are. You know what I'm saying? Sure. So I just want to encourage people to read, and if you don't like to read or cannot read, because I don't want to make the assumption that everyone can read, documentary films are important. That's why I mentioned Eyes on the Prize. I think it's important to check out Ezra Edelman's great documentary on ESPN about O.J. Simpson, which is not just about O.J., but it's about race and class in America and celebrity. There's so many things that we can digest musically. I was talking on another show the other day, brothers, and I kept saying Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On," John Coltrane's "The Love Supreme," anything by Bob Marley, Fela Kuti, Nina Simone, Lauryn Hill, Public Enemy. You know what I'm saying? I think that we have to really want to seek out information. And I want to stress to folks, we have to understand that leadership is a skill set. Leadership is a some people are organically charismatic and great speakers. But when I think about leadership, can you organize and can you put things together? Can you build things? Can you build and create stuff? Because that's what we really need. And we gotta participate in the process. People always say, Kev, why does voting matter? Well, it determines how much resources go to your school district, how much resources come into your community where you live. Why does the census matter? For the same reason. And people say things like, I don't want anyone in my business. Well, guess what? If you live in America and you got a social security number, you already can be found. If you're on social media, you can be found. If you got a cell phone, you can be found. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, there it is.
You're right. And Auntie, I got to say, even though for colored girls who've considered politics, we got to talk about voting. We've got to talk about politics. We got to talk about people being engaged in the process on all levels. It's kind of like chess, really chess, not checkers. If you know about chess, every piece can't move the same way.
That's right.
So you may only be able to take one step at a time, one piece. Or some may be able to move all across the board, and some may be able to move just diagonally or something. But you gotta be, if we're all on the same side, you'll be able to move and we can do what we need to do. As Kendrick Lamar, we gonna be all right, but we gotta work.
That's right. That's right.
Chief, you got some comments you said to read?
Yeah, stand by for 1 second.
Oh, he's what? Go Chief. This has been good. This show's kind of just flowed. I think I really believe we gonna be all right, but it's gonna take work. So I think it takes everybody doing what it is that they can do.
Kevin,
your auntie still on the line as well?
I think she is. Are you still there?
I'm still
Yolanda?
Well,
right.
Tell
you
your auntie.
The title of the book again. Can we get it on Amazon?
Yeah, for colored girls who have considered politics.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it on Audible.
That's awesome.
And also the paperback came out. It came out in 2018, and the paperback came out in 2019. So you can actually in 2019, I would get the paperback because we got Stacey Abrams to do a forward for us, and we got some more.
Right. That's wonderful.
In the second one. So
are you based in Atlanta?
We won an NAACP Image Award.
Congratulations! Wow. Are you based in Georgia?
No,
I'm in DC.
Oh, you're in DC. Okay, right on.
And
you got the 4 authors and
Kevin, I have followed you since you were with 5.
Wow, thank you. I was going to say I just wrote a cover story for the Washington Post magazine on Stacey Abrams that folks can check out. So I appreciate her a lot.
Cool.
Sure. And while we have all these authors on the line.
Thank you so much.
That you're doing, and you still do it.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to definitely recommend your book to a whole bunch of folks. That's what it's about. We got to share resources, ideas, and support each other.
And let me tell you the other part. The other part of that book. Not only does it talk about the politics and what folks need to do to kind of break into politics, but it also in the whole story is a story of a sisterhood. And how these sisters have remained friends, how they met, how they remained friends for what was it, almost 40 years?
Over 30, almost 40 years now.
Right, almost 40 years, which is, stuff that you always hear about people battling one another, or people can't get along. They've worked through their issues. All of that stuff is in the book. And also some of the things, as I point out pieces of it, that you've got, when Rosa Parks was in the rotunda, nobody figured how that happened. It's in that book.
Wow.
The story. These women pulled that kind of stuff together. I mean, it is a fascinating read.
Organizing. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
You got to call their chief.
Coming up through the ranks a long time ago, and we were always behind the scenes.
Right.
But we made things happen, and people have been shocked to see that there were really some Black women involved
Right.
in our history at that level.
Right.
Well, I always say that you want something to really happen, Black women are the ones who make it happen.
Absolutely.
Got that right.
Yes, I appreciate you so much. It's we in this election, because we know there's going to be efforts again at voter suppression. You mentioned Stacey Abrams. That's one of the things that when I wrote the piece for the Washington Post magazine on her in May, and it's still up online on their website. I mean, I just went through all the stats about voter suppression in Georgia. I mean, now imagine that on steroids all around the country come November. We know what's about to go down because this person in the White House is not trying to move on in any way, shape, or form. And so we really got to do our due diligence and take this very seriously. I agree with Noam Chomsky, who said, if he's reelected and gets another 4 years, it's going to set the country back easily a generation or two. The things that they will be doing if he remains in power, and it's just dangerous and detrimental to all of us. I mean, just look at the fact of what's happened with COVID-19 and the fact that we don't even have a uniform policy from the federal level, from the national administration on how to handle this, and it's just out of control. And these folks are cutting funding for testing and saying everything is okay. And I mean, it's just utter. I mean, there's never been this level of irresponsible leadership. We thought Nixon was bad back in the day, but you can't argue with the fact that Nixon was at least a statesman. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This person's not even a statesman.
Crazy. Chief, go with it. Chief, what you got?
Yes, sir. I have Janice on the line that wants to share some comments about our conversation. Janice, are you on the line? Can you hear us?
I am on the line, and
welcome to the show. Welcome to Straight No Chase. You're on with the Chief, Thin Bad, and our special guest, Kevin Powell.
I guess I was a little disturbed about one of the comments that was made about the fear. He said his mom, he couldn't understand the fear where the mom was coming from. And I think it's a misconception, and I think it goes back to people not knowing their history. I don't think they really understood or still don't understand what those monuments meant to people who grew up when they were erecting those. Because the monument stood for, you may have freedom on paper, but to us, you are still slaves. That's what the monuments were put up there to remind you. And when we had people, like you were saying, they tell people, just give them a minute, they'll settle down and get back in their place. That's not the way that went down. The way that happened was they let you do that for a certain period of time, but then they made an example out of whoever they thought the leader was. And they told you that if you continued, this is the same thing that was going to happen to you. And we're talking about very, very gruesome things that were done to African Americans. I mean, things like tarring, feathering a Black person, dipping them in scalding hot tar. Things like, wrapping them in that Confederate flag and setting it afire. I mean, those are the kinds of things and memories that people have when they look at the Confederate flag and when they look at those monuments. It's not just, part of history. They did things to intimidate African Americans, to make you feel less than a person. And it was a reminder. And you need to understand where Juneteenth came from. It wasn't that those people didn't know they were free. It was the fact that they were not allowed to be free until the army came down and freed them. So, we just need to get that point over, because they make it seem like those people were free all that long time and they didn't even know that they were no longer slaves. Yeah, they knew they were no longer slaves, but they knew that had they tried to act on that, they would have been killed or made an example of. So, those are the kinds of things. And it's not that Black people have been afraid. It's the fact that we did what we had to do to save the family.
I think that.
I guess that's kind of sort of what
Okay.
I wanted to say.